So, Matthew, you are very involved here locally on the ground, but you've also been doing federal work now for several years. During COVID, you were one of the people who started Be an Arts Hero, which came out big on the scene in terms of original content, talking about the impact of COVID specifically on arts workers and trying to lift that up. What's the work that needs to be done to influence government to understand and value arts workers?
It's a great question. It's the question. I think that as we have learned, as people who have been in the space for a long time know, and I think as we're all learning on the grassroots, is that the arts, ironically, has a story problem in our government. And so what's really great about having labor action in the creative economy is that it's teaching legislators that what we do is work, that what we do is labor. And it's not just about TV and film production, it's about all the down the line workers that are associated in their congressional districts and in the local community. And it's also live events, it's theater, it's opera, it's galleries, museums, it's culture. Arts and culture is the creative workforce. What needs to happen is the narrative that is told, I find, when it's a numbers story, you're talking about the economics, and you recognize that, and you teach legislators that, hey, we're 5.2 million creative workforce strong. That's American jobs. Over $1 trillion generated, more than agriculture and mining combined, about 300 billion more than transportation. When you're talking about those kinds of numbers, suddenly it's a different conversation in the government. So that's why I think the story needs to be through the numbers, because the other story we've been telling hasn't been working as effectively. That the arts are good for the soul and the spirit, and that's why we do it. I never went into this thinking I want that job. I thought, I love to do this. I have to do this. This is a calling. And that calling gets turned against us because you love what you do, we can pay you less. That era of diminished returns and that story needs to end now. And that's part of what this strike is about. You cannot exploit the love for what we do to suppress our wages. That does not happen anymore. That's why this is a historic double strike.
It also doesn't serve the economy generally either. No. So talk a little bit about that, why it matters to actually pay people a living wage.
And I want to take that a step further, not only a living wage, but a saving wage.
Yeah, thriving wage.
A thriving wage.
Yeah.
Because that's the American thing to do, to share in the wealth that we are generating. It's the fair thing to do. We invest that money back into our communities. We're buying goods in our communities. There's a lot of conversation right now about UBI.
UBI being universal basic income.
Universal basic income. So that money goes back into the community. You're buying goods, you're buying services. And so when you pay people a living wage, a savable wage, a thriving wage, they're going to stimulate their local economies. So when you have a creative economy that is robust as ours is in this country, and you pay people a thriving wage, they're going to stimulate their local economies. They're going to buy more supplies.
So it makes sense.
It makes perfect sense.
Okay.
And why when you have 7 CEOs who are making over $770 million, in our case here, and we're fighting over pennies? So it's a comprehensive conversation about capitalism that this becomes the microcosm of, and every labor action becomes a microcosm of a larger picture about how capitalism is failing us. And actually, it's not capitalism, it's a kind of oligarchy. It's socialism for the rich, and it's rugged individualism for everybody else. The longer this goes on, the more time we invest in that narrative and in that truth, and the more we can educate other people. That's why we're seeing so many labor actions.
What is government's role? Why should government invest in the arts and the culture and the infrastructure and arts workers? Why should they do that?
Well, one, as I mentioned before, we're fiscal hard power and political soft power. When you invest in our creative infrastructure, you're investing in our country, you're investing in the very expression of democracy, and you are stimulating local economies. I don't know what the numbers are. Do you know what the exact numbers are for every dollar that gets invested by the NEA?
It's another $12.
We have to look at those numbers. Those numbers, the return on investment is great when multiplied across the country. And just to that also makes me think of, we are a jobs multiplier. So when you invest, you are stimulating your economy. So the role of the federal government is to recognize that when they invest money, it is an outsized return of investment. And there are very few other industries. Like when you invest in coal, there has to be coal in the ground. Well, we're a creative coal mine. You can plant us anywhere, and we've shown state by state, district by district, wherever we are, that we are creative coal mines and we stimulate the local economy.
What do you think is the role of arts in terms of, obviously we've got some major problems. I mean, beyond the fact that we've got this terrible um, stress in terms of the wealth versus the people and just being able to afford a living wage. But we've got a mental health crisis in the United States. We've got a crisis of isolation. We've got climate change that we can no longer pretend doesn't exist.
Yeah.
What's the role of the arts? How can we show that we can be part of the solution to some of these issues?
Because we're in the story business, because we're in the ideas communication business, who better than artists to tell the public what's going on with the climate, to break down this data in consumable forms so we can understand what's happening on our planet, this miracle of creation. We don't want to lose it. The role of the artist has never been more important because we're not only in a crisis of democracy, we're in an existential crisis of our planet. And that's why we need to invest. There's a bill right now that Ted Lieu just reintroduced, the 21st Century Federal Writers Project Act. And when you look at what that investment does and why we had that investment in the 30s during the New Deal, that helped tell the story of America. It helped go to where the silence is and make the invisible visible, to give voice to the voiceless, to amplify the voices of those that weren't heard. So we understood the full contours and dimensions of who, what, where, and why America was. And I think we need to do the same thing today. We have to. Otherwise, what are we doing here if we're not exploring what it means to be human? That's all we have at the end of the day. The society we have is an expression of our value and what we don't value. So we need to really look hard at that, and we need to have a deep conversation about what kind of society we want to live in.
I think it's time for a creative solution.
I completely agree. And you're leading the way.
No, we're all leading the way. We all need to gather together to unite as a workforce that happens to be in an industry that has been historically undercapitalized, that has been historically underutilized,
Yes.
Right? It's been utilized for entertainment and economic gain.
Right.
And that's certainly an easy story, I think, for us to tell. But we have not been tapped in the way that we could in terms of incredible brain trust as well, right? Just innovative thinkers, creativity, and as you say, just incredible storytellers in a way that doesn't polarize us further, but in a way that actually can tell a story to help bring us together towards a common good, right?
Yes, and to your thing about mental health, your point about mental health, the next generation is so traumatized. We're all so traumatized right now. What better than arts education to teach people how to work in an ensemble, how to work together, learning skill sets, learning math through music, learning math through a light plot, learning history and social studies and civics through whatever play you're doing. When to be louder, when to be softer, how to be civic in an orchestra, in a band. These are skill sets that we don't prioritize, that we have to, because the social fabric is tearing. And the arts heal that fabric. They stitch it back together. They teach people how to be people.
I mean, and I think that we've given it a try for so long without centering artists and creative workers and cultural bearers. And I think we're not killing in a game at this point in time.
Not.
So why not?
Why not?
Why not put the focus in a place that actually could heal, could give a better sense of belonging for all of us, could provide meaning, right? While still doing all the stuff that everybody cares about, stimulating the economy, providing good paying jobs, which is why we're here today fighting, and not further automation necessarily. No. That's not going to bring humanity to a better place. No. I think we've seen that. So, yeah.
That self-checkout scanner that replaces a job, those savings don't go laterally. They go straight to the top.
That's right.
And when we recognize that we are big business because we're local business, that shifts the whole paradigm in government. So all the policy that's on the table and all the policy that has yet to be written can reflect, the business part of it, but also the fact that why are so many people in this business? It's because they care about their own humanity. They have the impulse to create, to share, to be in communion with one another. It's vital.
It's vital. All right, it's vital.
Capricorn.